Order, order. I will call Sonia Kumar to move the motion and I will then call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Sonia Kumar to move the motion.
I beg to move the House has considered parking in our town centres. Thank you, Ms Burness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I stand here to voice concerns about increased parking fees. Local authorities are trying to claw back their way out of financial difficulties by making decisions to increase parking fees across the country. In my constituency, Dudley Council have implemented these changes, which have been subject to much debate. Our high streets and leisure centres are the heart of our communities. They provide the social and economic value for residents in Dudley and across the UK. But in the recent years, we have seen too many once thriving high streets fail. This is why successive governments have attempted to reverse this trend. Grant funding for high streets improvements, business improvement districts, empty shop strategies, business rate relief, and the list goes on. Many of these measures were only required because of mistakes in development policy over several years. Previous governments have attempted to reverse this trend, but mistakes have been made in developing policy over the last 14 years. We've seen council budget eroded, forcing councils to make impossible decisions. And on reflection, the level of funding proposed by the previous government seems contradictory in hindsight. But ultimately, this has meant local people are the ones that are suffering. Luckily, many councils learnt from these mistakes and have proactively avoided developments that undermine the viability of high streets. But the rise in internet shopping has continued to drive shoppers from our historic towns, and long-standing traders in Dudley have suffered. Of course.
I'm sorry, can I comment on it? This is an incredibly important issue for my constituency, and I know for everyone who's here as well. But the footfall is the lifeblood of the local high street, and there is a need to get the balance between car parking and accessibility. My council have implemented discounts for 5-hour parking and are considering discounts for 2 to 3 hour parking to allow people to spend more time and money in a reasonable time frame. Does the Honourable Lady agree that if that was done in my council of Ards and North Down and done across the United Kingdom, that would help the footfall and help the town centres and the high streets? Thank you.
I agree with my Honourable. I also would say friend, actually. Yeah, I agree that actually if we had parking charges for that were extended and not just for an hour, people that want to get a coffee wouldn't have to be charged for 1 hour parking of £1.80, which is what's been implemented in my constituency. And instead, they will be not having to just get their coffee and then pay for the parking charges. They can actually just then spend a longer amount of time and increase the footfall.
I thank and congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Dudley, for securing today's important debate on parking in town centres, because the recent decision by Conservative Lib Dem controlled Slough Borough Council to foist controlled parking zones across the town rather than just in the town centre has left many of my residents feeling completely sidelined and angry because their views in the consultations have been ignored. So does my honourable friend agree that whilst parking measures are very much needed, it is important to respect the views of residents rather than these excessive cash cow schemes?
No, I agree with this 100%. I think the parking charges have become a cash cow, and I really respect the opinions that you've had. And this is why I think it's absolutely absurd that councils across the country have implemented it, like Dudley Town Council. And this is why I think really we need to be thinking about the town centres and how we can drive footfall and not reduce footfall. Yeah. And I feel like we're robbing Peter so Paul could cut a ribbon. Clearly, there's a fair balance to be struck between generating a revenue through parking charges and ensuring vibrancy and accessibility of town centres, but too many authorities are not getting that balance right.
On that point, Honourable Friend,
of course.
Thank you, and thanks to my honourable friend from Dudley for securing this debate. In Northumberland Heath Ward, in my constituency, councillors Baljeet Gill and Wendy Perfect have been working tirelessly to support local traders who'd like to introduce free parking for a very short period for that small range of independent shops in Northumberland Heath. Does my honourable friend agree that councils should investigate measures to reduce and also look at those shorter free parking arrangements in order, as she said, to support the viability of those small independent traders?
Yes, I do, and I think my trader and long-standing trader in the constituency, Christine Bosworth, would agree with you. And she's been operating for the last 13 years in the craft shop. And she shared with me some really poignant points that I'd like to share with this chamber today. Christine said that actually there's been a really wide drop of footfall in the constituency and in the town centre, and it's eye-opening that there's a lack of now accessibility to the town centre, and it's unusable and too expensive, while cheaper options are too far for elderly people and disabled visitors to get to the town centre. Traders are tied into long leases and face mounted pressures to ensure that they can they can come to the town centre and ensure that actually that people can access it. These changes and implementations are without proper consultation, which further risk eroding the vibrancy of our historic town centre. Bruno Copiano, the manager of the Churching Shopping Centre in Dudley, has shared concerns with me about the impact that these charges have on local businesses. Many traders have been having challenges for many years, including with COVID-19.
Would the Honourable Lady give way? Thank you. In the borough of Redbridge, for which I was the leader of the council for the last 10 years, we brought in 1 hour free parking. And what that did was it actually increased the footfall, it increased the churn of cars leaving, it brought the shopping back to local people for local shops, and of course it created more business rates because our local shopping centres are absolutely thriving. Would my honourable friend agree that there is more than one way to make money, and sometimes you just have to be a little bit more imaginative and give the local people what they want by giving them free parking, and they will spend the money locally?
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the proposals that I have put forward to the leader of the council, is actually having an hour of free parking. As I suggested, if somebody wants to catch a coffee in the town centre, you don't want to pay for a parking charge and then get your coffee and then leave. This is only driving business out. So, as I spoke to Bruno and a number of traders around the town centre, he said to me that actually it's not just this town centre in particular, it's across many other across the country. And the additional problem with my town centre is that we're already getting disruption because of the construction work around the transport area with the ongoing bus service, the tram line, and more customers are now forced to use their cars.
On that point with my honourable member. Thank you. Let's thank the Honourable Member for Dudley for securing this very important debate. Parking is, of course, a problem that doesn't exist in isolation. As you were just touching upon there, it is also about linked to public transport. In many areas, including mine in Gravesham, has a large rural network, but of course that network isn't served by buses, hence why people are forced into their cars. Does the Honourable Member agree with me that we need to be working with our local authorities to improve the rural infrastructure and thereby alleviating issues, including parking in our town centres?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree with my honourable friend, as accessibility to town centre is actually really quite difficult. We don't have a tram system, we don't have any local trains, we only have a bus service, and that can be ad hoc at times. So I welcome actually the new bus consultation period that Richard Parker, our Labour Mayor, has now put forward. So this time is not the rise of parking charges with access, as you said before. Parking remains a critical lifeline for many high streets, especially for those with low income in Dudley. Rising parking charges is pushing customers away from Dudley Town Centre and into out-of-town retail parks like Maryhill, which has free parking, and encouraging them to shop online. It's crucial we consider the long-term impact of these charges for traders, local SMEs, who are the backbone of the economy. On a recent walk around in Dudley Town Centre, I counted up to 35 empty shops. A staggering amount of these shops have been struggling due to the austerity measures, the pandemic and the cost of living crisis.
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Member for Dudley for securing this debate. In my constituency of South and Eastern Rochford, and one of the sort of main sort of market towns outside of the constituency, which is Rochford, we have an issue with regards to sort of, let's just say, it's not the most friendliest of parking. And so what we have is people who visit the local library for library services, but also people who want to apply for sort of blue badges as well. They use the library for this. And what we've had is very sort of like, you know, quite opportune sort of like parking enforcement. And the fees, what people are paying is astronomical. And the local community is being sort of caught out by this. People have mentioned how important it is with regards to the community and how we can sort of get our town centres back. So what I would say is I've been talking to the British Parking Association so that when we have these contractors managing our local assets, they need to be seen to be doing more to support the community. The community need to be visiting their local high streets, regenerating their local community. So will the Honourable Lady agree with me that it's really important that we need to see these contractors do more to help our communities reimagine themselves?
No, I agree with my honourable friend, but actually the contractors need to be looking about what we're doing on the town centres and actually where that money is going back in and back into the economy and back into local businesses and residents. So I agree with my honourable friend. I think the future of high streets lies on the ability to adapt and offer a range of experiences that draw people in, not just through retail, but through leisure, community activities, such as health on the high streets and accessibility of services. I ask my council to reconsider their approach to parking charges. It's important that we strike the right balance to allow for continuity of access and the vibrancy of towns, which underpin our businesses that are around the area. In Dudley, the proposed increase in parking charges, it does not just hurt traders, but also local residents who rely on car access due to the lack of alternative transport options. For instance, students from low-income backgrounds who rely on the cars to get into the Learning Development Centre, who will be forced to reconsider studies if the cost of parking becomes too burdensome. These are students who want to upskill and contribute to the local economy, yet they face the prospect of being priced out because of the parking charges to access their education. In addition, the students and local residents who visit the leisure centre for their health and well-being will also feel the pinch. Many use the facilities regularly, and I spoke to an 80-year-old member using the leisure centre who said this was a vital lifeline for socialising and community connection. The proposed charges would essentially double the cost of membership for every daily user, impacting the very fabric of our community. The parking charges, if to continue, should be reinvested into the community and businesses alike, providing a sustainable model for traders where businesses and residents reap the benefits. Depending on the size of a town and what their solutions have, each town will need its own unique solution. But the implementation of the solutions must be relative to the scale of the problem to each town, and the voice of the community should be at the heart of all decisions. A thorough consultation should be conducted prior to the implementation of any charges being made in a town centre. So let us treat car parking not as a peripheral issue, but as an integral component of a broader strategy for future town planning and revitalising our town centres.
Well said.
The question is that this House has considered the matter of parking in town centres. I call Kirith Entwistle.
Thank you, Ms. Furness, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Dudley, for tabling such an important debate on a topic that affects us all in so many different ways in daily aspects of our lives. I declare an interest as a member of the Women and Equalities Select Committee and want to touch on a slightly different aspect of this issue in terms of accessibility and providing access to public spaces. As a long-time advocate for working families, this debate is personal for me. Across Britain, from Dudley to Sheffield to my own hometown of Bolton, we face a troubling problem. We are building more flats, more homes, and encouraging people to move without building the parking that is so desperately needed alongside it. Ms Furness, we are building family homes in town centres like mine in Bolton, but we are failing to provide family-friendly infrastructure that parents desperately need alongside it. Parking in town centres, as mentioned, is a prime example. Shopping centres, workplaces, even hospitals, they all fall short of providing sufficient parent and child parking spaces with wider bays and convenient short walks to entrances. The problem is threefold. Parent and child spaces are too few, enforcement is lax, and unclear regulations harm those who need them most. At my local supermarket, the scene is all too familiar. The few parent and child spaces are taken by large vans or two-door convertibles, vehicles with no sign of families in tow. The result? Parents like me, trying to load a toddler into a car seat in a standard space, face an almost impossible task without bumping the car next door. The solution isn't complex. We need to design, as my honourable friend mentioned, town centres with public in mind. Starting with public parking, let us expand family-friendly spaces and curb rule breaking by enforcing the strict regulations used to safeguard blue badge holders. Once public spaces set the standard, private car parks will follow. Even worse, town centre parking completely overlooks pregnant women. Imagine being 8 or 9 months pregnant, swollen feet, aching back, every step a marathon. Yet for parent and child parking at supermarkets, pregnant women are expected to walk in and queue at customer support to request case-by-case permission. The irony is glaring. Spaces intended to make life easier are instead placing an even greater strain on pregnant women. So why is progress on family-friendly parking moving so slowly? Why are pregnant women still being overlooked? When former Facebook Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg was working at Google and became pregnant, the company's car park lacked any spaces for pregnant women. Drawing on her lived experience, she raised the issue with Google's male co-founders, and the policy was changed soon after. The problem? Google's male leadership had never even considered the needs of pregnant women in the first place, and that happens all too often. Similarly, in Westminster, it is often left to women members of Parliament to bring attention to the problems that create daily frustrations for women. I am confident that the Minister agrees with me that we must move to prioritise town centre parking for families and pregnant women and accessibility for all. Beyond that, I sincerely hope the Minister agrees we must also move towards a Parliament which proactively addresses these problems, rather than relying on us women to highlight them. Ms Furness, parking should be accessible for all, and it provides a lifeline to our town centres, and I commend my honourable friend for bringing this issue to the House.
Thank you, Ms Furness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship this afternoon. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Dudley, for securing this important debate and for the powerful case that she made. It's one of the great joys of being the High Streets and Town Centre Minister is that I get a number of these debates in this room here where people talk about their communities, and it is always interesting to hear in both the commonalities and the differences and the challenges that they're facing. Though I might say with a degree of mischief, Ms Furness, it's not often that such debates inspire such a coverage of all the nations and regions that make up the UK. And again, I think that is a sign that the Honourable Lady is exactly in the right space in this. I will give way indeed, yes.
Melanie Ward.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I wonder if the Minister recognises that as our shopping habits have changed, so has the need for parking in town centres. In my biggest town of Kirkcaldy, we are blessed to be right on the coast. We could have beautiful sea views. We could have housing, workspace, facilities to attract tourists. Instead, we have dilapidated and unused car parks, which are a true blight on our town centre and on our seafront. And I would say to the Minister that redevelopment funding is badly needed so that our town can fulfil its potential and meet today's needs of our residents.
I think that's a really important challenge, and you know, the honourable lady, the member for Dudley, finished on the point about this not being a peripheral issue, but as needing to address broader issues in regards to parking and town centre vibrancy. And I think that's exactly what the honourable lady is saying in terms of having that more planned approach as to what the future could look like. And no doubt there would need to be support from the government of the day, and that message was heard very strongly. I thought my honourable friend made an important and similar point to the one that the honourable members just made around the reasons for the decline in our high streets and town centres, those obvious changing patterns of behaviours. I'm sure colleagues wouldn't, but they could easily order a book in the time in which I'm speaking, or order quite a few probably. That is different, and with those, and that is not going to go away. We know that times have been very hard for people. Austerity has been a really difficult period for our communities, and we know that still now people are struggling with money in their pockets. All of that contributes to challenges. So it behoves us to try and drive footfall and to use any lever that we have to drive footfall, of which parking, as the honourable lady said, is a really important one. But I think that we heard in her contribution as well, you know, the voice of her constituents come into this room, be they business, be they long-term residents, be they students, be they leisure centre users, and I hope they see that their views are being echoed and being expressed in this place and are being taken seriously. So I want to cover some of the points that the honourable lady said, and I don't want to miss the final contribution from my honourable friend from Bolton either. And I recognise, and I've seen the coverage as others will have done, the pain and the disappointment caused by Dudley Council's decision to scrap 2 hours of free parking, and the impact that's having on motorists, and the disappointment for residents and visitors. And I've seen the rally, and I'm sad to hear that, as the honourable lady said, that the consultation, the sense was that that wasn't done properly, because that is an important part of trying to do a process properly, even if the results can be disappointing. But parking, you know, together with effective public transport, but together with decent active travel, is essential to the resilience of our towns and cities. I will give way in 1 second. However, the provision of accessible and affordable parking is particularly important, as has been said, outside of the major metropolitan cities and in rural communities where that public transport offer may be limited. People need their cars, as my honourable friend from Gravesham said. I give way.
Thank you so much. One of my major towns, Harpenden, I've had a lot of businesses like Threads or We who have said parking charges are changing and they're worried. But the Minister mentions about services such as parking and transport. And isn't it sad that after 14 years of the Conservatives and cuts to local councils, they have been forced to make some of these difficult decisions, and it's now time for us to help empower local authorities to support businesses' high streets and also invest in our communities to make sure that they thrive.
Yeah, I absolutely do, and it's at the heart of this government's approach, and I'll go through very quickly some of the ways at the end it's the heart of this government's approach to give those communities those tools to change place. And of course there's a financial aspect to that, but there's a power sense to that too, about shaping the things that shape your community. And this, I think, debate gets to the heart of this, because parking is one of those, as I say, major levers that a community has. And it's the interest, I think the important point is that it's the community's lever. Yes, it's held by the local authority, but it's the community's lever. I'm going to make a point about that shortly, because fundamentally, responsibility for parking provision, Ms Furness, in town centres rests with the relevant local authority under the Traffic Management Act 2004. And the statutory guidance that accompanied that clearly sets out that parking policies have to be proportionate and have to support town centre prosperity, and that it's for those local authorities to decide on how parking should support that, whether it should be free, whether it should be tariffed, for how long. And you know, local authorities are best placed to do that in the sense through their local transport plans, through their local insights, and they have to find that balance between residents, between local business, those who live and work in an amenity, of course the access of emergency services. And under the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, local authorities can set their own parking tariffs. And in general, actually, I think almost everybody will at some point set a tariff, certainly in a busy area. But again, they must be proportionate and should not be set at unreasonable levels. And this is an important part that came out in the honourable member's contribution. The point of local parking policies is not to be revenue raisers or indeed cash cows, as has been said. And the important point again, and this is one for colleagues to have a very discerning eye locally on, that the point is that surpluses, how a surplus is spent is prescribed in legislation under Section 55 of that 1984 Act. It requires any surplus raised from parking schemes to go back into local authority funded transport or environmental schemes. So again, back into communities, as my honourable friend said. So there needs to be a discerning eye that that really is taking place, and crucially that communities are having a voice in that. Now, all areas, I remember this myself and there's other colleagues in the room who've been members of their council, I remember wrestling with that too in Nottingham about how to create that convection, because you don't want people to come to a town centre and to park there all day for work, go to and from the office and then go home again and not kind of contribute to the local economy. You want a turnover, but you want an incentivisation as well. And, colleagues have talked about the effectiveness that a free hour can do about pulling people through. And again, I think there's very good examples of where that's worked. I think the challenge for me is, and the challenge for local authority colleagues listening to this debate with interest, is that, yes, this is a local authority function, but local authorities are their community. And it's for all of our local authorities, and I felt challenged at this when a member of mine, and I challenge mine now, to make sure that the policies that they're doing reflect the wishes, reflect the interests of the local community, and that they're getting the public into the conversation. I will do shortly, that they're getting business into that conversation as well. And I was surprised to hear from the honourable members' contributions that clearly local businesses don't feel that's what's happened here. I give way.
I thank my honourable friend, and I was grateful to him for visiting Rugby and having a walk around. One bit of the town that we didn't reach was Elliott's Field, which is an out-of-town shopping centre. And I wonder if he would agree with me that those out-of-town shopping centres compete with town centres, not least because they can attract anchor clients, but also because they can offer free parking. And in the case of Rugby Borough Council, where I must declare an interest, I'm still a councillor, they are thinking very carefully about innovative measures that they can take, whether that might be free parking, which was offered in some car parks in December, or rapid decisions on opening one particular council-owned car park when the theatre is showing a production. So I wondered if there's anything else that central government can do to help them in this difficult balance.
Yeah, I think that's a really important intervention. I wonder if, looking back on some of those decisions on out-of-town retail, whether communities would make the same decision now that they did. I think what was very clear in the honourable gentleman's contribution was that parking is clearly a driving factor in their success. So the public are telling us to some degree actually what they want to see, and we really ought to listen to them. The honourable lady talked about broader support and vacancy particularly. I would encourage colleagues to support their local authorities in promoting the new high street rental auctions, bringing those vacant units back into use. Particularly, I would also point to our work around safety in town centres. Ms Furness, again, if we're driving footfall, people will only come or come a second time if they feel that they are safe. Now, footfall alone promotes community safety because, energy and people being present deters crime and deters antisocial behaviour. But nevertheless, our commitment around 13,000 more police and police community support officers will have town centres at their very heart, so that there is that visible presence, and our town centres are places people feel safe to park their car and to shop themselves. Before I close, I want to address the honourable member for Bolton North East's contribution around parent and child parking bays. And there is no current legislative requirement in this space. I'm conscious the honourable lady has a 10-minute rule bill designed to change this, but in the interest, as she says, of challenging colleagues, particularly male colleagues, to come up with solutions, there is a possible workaround solution at this stage using the current legislative framework, because authorities can make parking provisions for specific road users, whether they're residence parking, we'd have many examples in our own communities, or blue badge users. Under current rules, it would be feasible for a local authority to make specific on-street bays permit holder only and include a permanent identifier on that sign. Again, we would see those in our residence schemes in our communities, but then only issue those permits to pregnant women or parents with children. And they would have to, of course, justify reserving those spaces. I think the honourable lady probably did that for them, and find a decent way to publicise where those bays are located. Again, it would be about probably being in the right place, I would expect. So I think that is something that colleagues can raise with their local authorities. That is a bit of a workaround, but in the spirit of meeting her challenge of being solutions focused, that would be one of them. So I thank her for that contribution. So I will conclude by, again, thanking the honourable member for securing this important debate today. I think she sets out very clearly some of the challenges facing our town centres. At the heart of it comes footfall, and at the heart of footfall is that lever around parking facilities that are available and affordable. Local authorities have that leadership and that responsibility and that stewardship of local transport plans, but fundamentally, That is for the community, and that is to be something that reflects the needs of local residents, of local businesses. Clearly that's not taken place here, and that's why the honourable members had to take quite a significant step of taking this from the High Street in Dudley all the way to Parliament, but I think she was right to do so. And it is hugely important that the community are heard in Dudley, are heard in Kirkcaldy, are heard in Ilford and in Bolton and in Southend and all the other places we've heard from today. It clearly is something that's really important across the country, and I'm grateful for colleagues for raising it. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the matter of parking in town centres. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. Just got it in, didn't we? Yes.